will obey your master.
Hello everyone! Pineapple here with the next part of Dark Gallifrey, Master. Part 1 by Lizzie Hopley, who's had a fair few writing and acting credits, having seen her last on the channel writing The Battle of Giants Causeway. And I'm starting to think Dark Gallifrey Part 1's a cursed. Morbius Part 1 was great, but the War Master Part 1 was messy, Missy Part 1 was a lot of setup, and felt a little dragged out and unbalanced, and this story, at least for me, is another miss. It's clearly building towards something really interesting, but with so many new characters that are hard to keep track of, me having to keep notes and reducing a couple to the one that does this, I think they needed more time. Maybe it should have been taken away from all the technobabble that it takes to focus on building up the dynamics of psychic ability users on Gallifrey and the ins and outs of the Academy, or the cast just needed to be reduced to maybe 4 survivors instead of 6, because as it is, I didn't feel like I really knew most of them. And with this part being spread a month away from the next, that's a bit of a problem. Gamara is our main character, played by Claire Huckle, and while her slightly frustrating manner can be compelling in her child form, I found her quite frustrating and up herself in the present of the story. And that's not good for your main character. Sure, she was taken under Romana's wing, but she comes off as a little unintelligent in moments and very self-important. There are some really nice empathizing moments, but I found for the most part, she was uninteresting. Cylindra, or Suli to Gamara, played by Millie Hikasa, is the one Gamara is closest to in the story. But you know what? Even after my re-listen, I can't recall what she really did in the past section. In the present, she's the one that calls the investigator and Gamara together to figure out what's killing the remaining people from the field trip off. But I also can't tell you what she did in the past, other than seeing a ghostly apparition calling himself Hawk Oth Death, which many of the others see anyway. The next of the group is Olzel, the one that due to a few hints I'm thinking won't make it out alive. But once again, a character that I only really know as the one that did this or that, being stabbed by a branch and hallucinating. She's played well by Francesca Gilbert, but there isn't a lot to be done with her character here. Most of the interactions with her though are from Tabreen, played by Nadia Violet Johnson. And I was expecting just the uptight, morally grey teacher's pet, and she does start out as mostly that, but her tenderness with Olzel seeming to fray the sicker she gets, and the more the Master influences her, I'm expecting good character moments next part. It's good setup. Next we have the cousins Torlus and Borin, played respectively by Chris Odelele and Nathan Griffiths. Borin seems the meeker of the two, with Torlus being outspoken and critical of those higher up than him, but I'll be honest, apart from the drama when they crash landed, I couldn't care less about these two. I'm interested to see what Torlus will do next part, but in this one they do absolutely nothing for me. One of the characters solely in the present is a mind shield, the investigator brought by Suli to help with the investigation and get the story of the past from Gamara. She has a lot of new terminology and a whole new Time Lord doctrine to try and set up, as this story tries to help explore the mental side of the Time Lord Society and teachings, which match the Master well. But the Mind Shield mostly just has to put up with Gamara's shit, but I am interested to see what she does next time. Finally, we have the Master himself, and while I liked his moments of manipulation, he kinda feels barely in it. I can see how him being here manipulating will continue to build up in the next part, his manipulations of the young characters furthering, as it seems to insinuate one of them will die, but with how the other main characters were disappointing, the Master's role is clearly reduced to give them more focus. But it unfortunately isn't enough, meaning the Master's lacking role stands out like a sore thumb. Eric Roberts does well, but like I said, he's barely in his own story, making a double-edged sword that makes me dissatisfied with both sides. But you know what? He may have kidnapped some school children, but at least none of them brought guns.
There is nothing tough. There's nothing cool about taking a gun to school.
Now why don't we touch on the story? It's split into phases, a lot looser than Morbius's chapters, but work well in the story as it's the Mind Shield step program to get the info from Gamara. Gamara, being as annoying and up herself as possible, arrives at a remote location to meet Suli, but is only met with Cylindra's Mind Shield, sent to investigate her death, and telling Gamara that she is now the last of those from the field trip. Here to get the story from Gamara Gamara to possibly save her life. So we jump into the past where we meet the main cast, a group of promising students, and even if we don't have the time to really explore it, I do like that Lizzie Hopley tries to give us some institution and hierarchy to the Gallifreyans. Not only does it fit well tonally with the Master and Gallifrey focus, but especially with the repeated theme of the mind arts, it's something I haven't seen that heavily touched upon. The students are met with the Master, who has clearly done something to their tutor, and he takes them off-world. But the ride quickly goes wrong, crashing into a planet that looks a lot like Gallifrey. Maybe a little bit darker, meaning this could possibly be another version or a shadow of Dark Gallifrey, but will most likely not actually tell us what Dark Gallifrey is specifically. In the crash, Olzel is stabbed, Borin gets trapped between dimensions, only brought back when hit by a figure with what they think is a spear, but later seems to be an arrow, and the Master is dead, but to help them along comes a Matrix projection of the Master. The kid's putting his corpse into a waiting Utrastone, very convenient, which are basically suspended animation stones, introduced by Lizzie Hopley in the Box of Terrors. Gamara posits to the Mind Shield about the Time Lord legend Mother Quiver, and if this story is about her, I'm actually kinda psyched. Her existence is confirmed through the Box of Terrors, and we hear a woman cackling later that the main characters seem not to notice. Gamara and the Mind Shield have a nice moment where she reveals her battle scars to Gamara and shows her Suli's current state in a living death, the same as all her other friends. Torlus attacked after targeting the Doctor, Borin seemingly killed by something like Mother Quiver, and Tabreen seemingly dead with a pierced Utrastone. Clearly a message, as it takes a hell of a lot of power to destroy a Utrastone. Back in the past, they tell the Master about this Horkoth death, him realizing it's the Doctor, and we know 8 is gonna pop up, so it's probably him. Although I'm not holding my breath, the last time I heard 8 appear mid-storyline it was Planet Krynoid, and that was almost character assassination. The story ends with the cousins discussing this being an immoral psychological experiment, but swearing to stick together, Tabreen untrusted, Olzel not lucid, and the Master insinuating to Gamara, after his manipulations don't work, that one of them has to die to save Gallifrey. A pretty good cliffhanger for an otherwise, part of a story. So while I see really good creativity and an attempt to make an interesting mystery, the new characters are either frustrating, although that seems to be by design, so we can see their layers like Gamara, or they barely exist. Like me remembering Ozel simply as the one who hallucinates and got stabbed. Listening a second time, although I do have to say this was at time of release, whereas I wrote my part 2 and 3 reviews very recently, it seems just really hard to balance the Dark Gallifrey stories when they release a month apart, because Morbius perfectly set up its new characters and story, but every subsequent release fails to meet the balance. And maybe that's because each of these stories has been about a Master but jumps in from someone else's perspective, making them feel understaged by the Master and the Master feel underused thanks to playing second fiddle to the other characters. I hope people enjoy this story, and I really think it will work at least twice as good if you listen to it right before part 2, or at least close to part 2. But having these a month apart, they need a different writing style, as these 3 parts would really fit well together in a box set. But so far, Morbius is the only one to hit the balance between monthly and an all-at-once story perfectly. I'll have to give Dark Gallifrey Master Part 1 a 5.5 out of 10. Nowhere near as disjointed as the War Master Part 1, but I didn't vibe with these characters or the way the Master was used here as much as Missy Part 1. This score is mostly a combination of personal inability to like the characters and the story being a victim of the release schedule.
You will obey your master.
Last time in the past, the Master in his Bruce incarnation set a group of Gallifreyan schoolchildren alone on a barren wasteland with only his hologram as company, and is pretty clearly manipulating them to some unknown end. Our main character being the frustrating Gamara, who in the present is the only survivor of the group. All the others, including her crush Cylindra, are in waking death states, and an investigator is trying to get to the bottom of it with a sort of chapter separation to get Gamara through the traumatic story. We also have an obvious Doctor appearance coming up, since someone who seems to be him is flickering in and out of time, and we also have interesting mentions of Gallifreyan legend Mother Quiver, who was set up as a dangerous force interestingly in the Box of Terrors. So I'm interested to see where this story goes with some of my favourite Time Lords, not you Gamara, and a legend waiting to unravel, so let's get into Dark Gallifrey Master Part 2. First of all, in the characters, we have the protagonist, Gamara, reprised by Claire Huckle, and she is a lot more interesting this part. The way she is characterized, sort of one foot in the do what needs to be done camp, and the cringing at the inhumane camp, is done well, but my god is she whiny and annoying. There were multiple times, at least in her past, that I just wanted her to shut up, but she is a lot better as the older narrator with the Mind Shield as she discusses the past and her process in the Mind Shield stages. So sure, not terrible, but there were times I was definitely sick of her. While she is Gamara's focus in the present, Cylindra, reprised by Millie Hikasa, doesn't really have much to do. She has a lot of moments, but most of them are arguing with the others, rarely getting her way, and trying to pursue the moral high ground in a situation that, thanks to the Master, is far beyond doing the right thing. So while the performance is good and she's not written terribly, all I recall her doing is arguing that the Master and Tabreen are cruel and manipulative, causing Gamara's more whiny and annoying side to come out to argue with her. Probably the most cruel of the kids is Tabreen, reprised by Nadia Violet Johnson, and I can't say I like her that much, but she was interesting whenever she was around, spending her time either jealous of Cylindra due to her crush on Gamara, or torturing Olzel. So like I say, I don't like her that much, but she was consistently interesting and well performed. Olzel, reprised by Francesca Gilbert, takes a real beating this episode, seriously, tortured by her own psychic ability, and thanks to breathing in psychic wood smoke, then her powers going haywire and affecting everyone else. So both the cousins and Tabreen decide to follow the Master's wants and give him a mentally deteriorated, yet powerful Time Lord for his regenerative dissonance experiments, psychologically torturing the already injured and unstable young girl. It's not fun, but she is perfectly endearing as such a victim of circumstance, being the weakest and easy target for the Master. There's also a nice reference surrounding her as her mother's name is stated as Edavane, who I recall being a Time Lord character in Mother Quiver's first appearance, The Box of Terrors. They may not be the same character, but the use of the name is nice. Then once again are the two cousins, Taurus and Borin, and they're probably the least interesting of the main cast. We get to infer more of their darker backstories, as the psychic wood makes Borin hallucinate trauma and he is seemingly killed in front of Olzel when Taurus starts hallucinating thanks to Tabreen's psychic darts, or so she thought. But it seems to be a way to hurt Olzel since the Master must have let them go after playing a sufficient part in Olzel's decline, since both are hunted by Mother Quiver later. The Mind Shield is reprised by the writer herself, and she has good moments. I like her interactions with Gamara, and she's performed well, but she really does just feel like the way to get through the story here, to prompt Gamara, and will for the most part only be a full character in part 3. But that doesn't mean she's bereft of nice moments, especially when arguing with Gamara. Lastly, of course, is Eric Roberts as the Master, or as they know him, the Vector. And I love his performance. He gets really manipulative in this one, and sure, it's blatant and obvious that he's doing it in the story, but the way Eric Roberts can have those smarmy moments, but then come off completely personable and reasonable when convincing the students to traumatize and break someone, so while he still isn't acting as a character in person, I think the performance really sells his nudges. We get a nice previously on, which was good considering my reviews were months apart, and we start with Gamara and the Mind Shield discussing her phases. And I have to be honest, I liked the chapter system in Morbius, but this really doesn't work for me. Other than just being chapter-like breaks, I felt like sometimes the phases would vaguely direct Gamara and the Mind Shield's conversation. Within the story, I felt very little correlation between the meaning and the part of the story actually being told. Beyond them going, this is the next phase, and Gamara going, oh, that's the next phase, and then once the flashbacks stop, oh, that's what you really meant. It's a little repetitive and I just don't think they fit well. The flashbacks continue from the cliffhanger, Gamara and the Master discussing the ethics of picking one of them to sacrifice for Gallifrey, but also to get off that barren world. Gamara's love of folklore really interesting the Master, so he tells her more about Mother Quiver, a Time Lord regenerative dissonance sufferer with 7 minds, disowned and spent her time puppeteering a war in an alternate universe, D-Space. Or as the Master infers, Dead Space, once Quiver was done.
Quiver is my personal favorite.
Your favorite?
Leading 7 sides of one war all by yourself across a section of space encompassing 3 galaxies and 7 different time zones? All at once is an impressive feat, even for a Time Lord. Masterful, I should say.
There's a nice explanation of regenerative dissonance, and later, much like Morbius, mentioning the 11 regenerative dissonance seemingly a focus of the Dark Gallifrey line. He reveals this experiment is to give him a subject to try and cure regenerative dissonance in. Give him a broken, manipulative subject, and they're free to go. After the Mind Shield and Gamara discuss crushes and love triangles, having the violence avert Cylindra kill and rend a pig bear, while Tabreen enjoys watching, still being bitchy. Taurus tells Olzel about their wood situation, the wood getting harder to find as he belittles the girl, and everyone but Cylindra are getting ready to ditch Olzel. No one's saying it, but everyone ready to throw her under the bus. Tabreen knowing the cousins will do the same and hoping to keep Gamara close. In the present, Gamara has a nice scene talking to the comatose Cylindra, sent back to flashbacks by the Mind Shield. Cylindra finally finding out everyone's plans and calling the Master out on his clear manipulation and shifty identity, while Gamara, who apparently cares for her, instead tries to correct her like a bitchy Year 1 Hermione. The cousins have a nice little talk together, planning on how to convince the others to get rid of Olzel. Borin clearly not wanting to do it, but Taurus is really an unpleasant piece of work, seemingly ready to kill her just because she's different. It's really off-putting. I'm happy we already know he's going to perish. The Master reveals to Cylindra that Tabreen is ingratiating herself to Olzel for the sole purpose of abandoning her to break her. Gamara shocked, but annoyingly uncaring. The Master reveals to them that the woods around were once a psychic forest, the materials for psychic paper. The wood burning right by Olzel, inadvertently causing her condition to worsen and affect others in the first place. The Doctor appears again, and Taurus is ready to kill him instantly. Wow, way to ingratiate yourself to the audience, dickbag. While the fire's psychic smoke brings out Borin's trauma, causing him to freak out. They put the fires out, and we get to hear from the Master giving us some interesting info on D-Space, once peaceful until Mother Quiver set up shop, and giving us a little info into her personalities. Cylindra, Borin, and Gamara talk about Quiver and Olzel with the Master, him describing some interesting Time Lord lore while Tabreen and Taurus are away. Tabreen making darts out of psychic wood to attack with, while Taurus tries to interrogate Olzel, attacking her until Tabreen shows up, ready to torture him or Borin with the psychic darts in revenge. The other 3 hear them and are ready to stop Tabreen, Borin even taking a weapon, but the fake death is put into plan as Taurus fake hallucinates and kills his cousin, all in the service of traumatizing Olzel, without Tabreen in the loop, her darts not having worked. The cousins being taken away now that their job was done. Gamara and the Mind Shield figure out that when they were attacked, all of the survivors were at their peaks and accomplishments, positing revenge as the motive due to this. We get more flashbacks, but they're more recent. Gamara trying to talk to the other survivors, only really managing to see Tabreen, neither able to find any info on what they went through or who the Master was, but instead a little bit of flirting. Back in the past for the last time, Gamara and Cylindra see Tabreen making a storage box, and then going off to fake her death, begging Olzel to kill her, and then faking suicide. The story ending as Cylindra realizes it was planned, Gamara having known, but while Gamara chases a running Cylindra, the Doctor's spectre appears once again, seemingly using his arrow to kill Cylindra. A pretty solid cliffhanger, even if we know it's probably false. So part 2 was better than part 1, I thought part 1 was okay. The characters only starting to get interesting, and the Master didn't do much, but here the characters, while some are still annoying, are explored more in depth, and the Master's manipulations get bigger and more dangerous. Now, the not so solid framing device makes some scenes feel a little disjointed, not holding up well as a monthly release. Morbius, with its chapters, fine when separated, because it was quite linear, whereas here we're jumping all around the place with the present, the past that is a little bit before the present, and it's not like it's too complex, but when the release is a month apart each, this part feels a little less satisfying than it should, and while I am getting into Gamara even if she is still annoying, with most of the cast already kinda dead, dead, it's still a little hard to care deeply about them, leading me to not being very invested in them. So I'll give Dark Gallifrey Master Part 2 a 6.5 out of 10. Getting better, but not amazing. And not sucking me in as much as I would have liked, but I'm hoping the series ends quite strong, considering it's usually the middle part that's the best in Dark Gallifrey, and I do think that this story can get better.
You will obey your master.
Last time our cast were manipulated by the Master and spent their time torturing the injured girl, and at the end, Cylindra, disgusted with Gamara's actions or inactions, runs off and is seemingly killed by the Doctor. Sure, it's almost immediately shown to be bull, but it was a strong cliffhanger. Now, so far, Master is probably the lowest rated for me out of the Dark Gallifrey line, but I do hope the ending is strong enough to surpass the last two. And will we finally learn what Dark Gallifrey is? I doubt it, so let's talk about the characters. First of all is Gamara, reprised by Claire Huckle. And the phasers have finally done their job. In the last parts I found myself annoyed with Gamara and her attitude, but here as she is forced by the Master to trap Olzel and face those actions, I really enjoyed her, and Claire Huckle, who I thought was performing well, really goes for it. This episode did the impossible of investing me properly in Gamara and then murking her. The other major protagonist especially of this episode would be Olzel, or who will be revealed as the Mind Shield, or who will be revealed as Mother Quiver. Olzel's arc of being abused and manipulated culminates horrifically, and thanks to torture from the Master becomes Mother Quiver, sent to exact revenge on the kids who created her. And both actors perform the role solidly. Her decline from the Mind Shield to Mother Quiver was done well, but I don't really like her ending. Sure, her fate that she shares with Gamara and Cylindra is one thing, but it's her flip-flopping that I don't appreciate. She's out for revenge, turns good, and while understandable that she'll revert when faced with her abuser, she strikes down two people who were about to get murdered anyway, so it just felt a little narratively pointless, I don't know. Either way, for the most part, written and performed greatly. Cylindra doesn't have much to do this time around, and when brought back is immediately killed, but narratively I suppose she fits well. And I can't say what little performance was allowed was negative. Now to one of the bigger roles, the inevitable Doctor cameo is brought to fruition with Paul McGann playing the 8th Doctor. And while he doesn't accomplish much, the performance was great as always, and the way he fits into the story explaining his seemingly attempted murder and backward speak were really interesting. And it's always great to see, or in this case here, a confrontation between 8 and the Bruce incarnation of the Master. Even if it's only in the 3rd act, it's still well done. The Master finally reappears in physical form, he manipulates Gamara pretty heavily and then forces Olzel to become Quiver. And just when she thinks she's free, he tracks her down, enslaves her, and kills her again. This Master is not only played as well as the Doctor by Eric Roberts, he finally gets to upgrade his manipulation to full-on evil torture mode, well showing off how much crueler the Master can be near this incarnation. And while a little annoying months apart, I appreciate the build-up to his physical appearance through all 3 episodes. The other characters from the Crash all appear in cameos showing their deaths and revivals, but I don't have much to say. They're interesting little vignettes, but I can't say I was astounded. Now into the story. Once again we get a nice recap, and starting where we left off, we get poetry from Paul McGann as he tells Gamara about Mother Quiver and that the Master is alive. Cylindra not actually injured, but just seemingly passing out. What a classic Doctor Who instant cliffhanger resolution. 8's story is a little different. Instead of Mother Quiver's past, he talks about the future, or really Gamara's present, that one day Mother Quiver will take her revenge on them. Him only able to talk briefly thanks to pushing a vortex manipulator, revealing this is the place she was born, but his connection too garbled to get much else out. Cylindra may be okay, but the Master decided now is the best time to send her back to Gallifrey, much to Gamara's rage. And the Master takes a real pleasure in getting Gamara all worked up at his antics. I can easily imagine his shit-eating grin.
Where is she?
Gamara, to what do I owe?
Where is she?
And which lovely lady are we talking about today?
Cylindra, you took her right out of my arms.
Did I? Are you sure?
So now with Gamara alone, she has no other choice but to do his bidding in finishing off Olzel's demise, and revealing even more disgusting and disturbing things that Tabreen did to earn her escape. Seriously, I hate that she's one of the ones that actually has a chance of surviving the Master by the end. Sure, Cylindra and kinda Borin are the only moral ones here, but it sucks that the cousins and Tabreen, while all the good or forced to do bad characters, Olzel, Cylindra, and Gamara are all unceremoniously gunned down. The Master tries many different angles to manipulate Gamara, not all of them working, but the pressure is enough to get her off her ass and over to Olzel, who is very concerned about her friends. Jesus, the performance in their confrontation is done so well. Gamara's turn to cruelty and desperation feels very real, and Olzel's manipulated and terrified disposition as Gamara forces her weakened and injured form thanks to Taurus is heartbreaking as Gamara assaults her and forces her into a small box to deliver to the Master. It might be one of the darkest parts of Dark Gallifrey in all honesty. Right up there with Morbius hijacking people's bodies and Seven burning to death. Gamara talks about arriving back on Gallifrey once her job was done, and of course it's Taurus and Tabreen that come around and fuck with her, putting fake memories in her head so no mind probing can uncover what actually happened to them. At this point in the story, the mind shield is fully spinning out, too much Olzel coming out when condemning Gamara's actions. We get more flashbacks after Gamara stuffs Olzel in her box, raging at the Master again, the Doctor even popping in so the two men can argue over Gamara's choice. The Master quickly flip-flopping between seemingly helpful to Gamara and yelling at her, eventually getting her to stop the Doctor's materialization. After hearing this, the Mind Shield suddenly starts testifying about Olzel and the Master, flashing back to Olzel being pulled out of the box, the real Olzel torture beginning as he lets her traumatized and scarred mind regenerate for the first time, him taking great pleasure out of her pain. And once it's done, he starts pontificating about regenerative dissonance, even mentioning the Six. And once she's done cooking, he takes great lengths into differentiating her personalities. The Master eventually able to control which mind is in control with a psychic bolt. And these clips are lengthy, but Eric Roberts' performance is enough to keep you interested the whole time over Olzel's pained screaming. He turns her into Mother Quiver, setting her on the path to what we already know happened, her hunting down those that betrayed her, but Olzel finally reveals herself, tossing the psychic bolt aside and taking great pleasure in making Gamara scared and throwing her around and revealing her plan. They go to Cylindra and reveal that the method that's keeping them all comatose is a special type of material in the arrow. A psychic metal called mensalem, using Olzel's own tortured psyche to torture her victims while comatose. We get to hear the clips of Mother Quiver hunting the others down, putting them in the same condition as Cylindra, and she talks about how the Master had the whole thing planned solely to make Mother Quiver for his purposes. And just as things start to get hairy, the Doctor pops in, still a hologram as the area is shielded, and H reveals he's gone about removing her arrows, freeing Tabreen and the cousins, but also that Olzel in fact has no regenerative dissonance. It's only her, manipulated and traumatized by the Master, him using his abilities and way with words to make her believe she had multiple personalities. Which only makes this installment darker. Sure, it's revealed by the Time Lords here that the world they were on was a dark, dead Gallifrey, pre-prepared by the Master with traps and shields to stop the Doctor meddling. I still don't know how it works in relation to the last kind of Dark Gallifrey we saw in the War Master. Is this Dark Gallifrey from D-Space? Is that version of Gallifrey the one that housed the Abomination, but since the Abomination was in the capital, they were just too far away? Or is this the Dark Gallifrey that Dark Gallifrey was an echo of? I just don't know. And at this point, I think I've given up trying to figure out what Dark Gallifrey actually is. Now, in this box set, sure, I don't like the whole phases thing, but I do think it's clever that at the end, the other characters like the Doctor hijack the narration. H drops some interesting dissonant lore, including a character named the Hydra, a pretty apt name, but his speech eventually turns Olzel more passive, ready to help free Cylindra and do the right thing. Gamara reveals that the visions of H stabbing people, he was in fact removing the arrows but in reverse. But as Olzel tries to see the Doctor again, the Master appears, his own shield covering the area now, so he forces Olzel to once again shoot Gamara and the new Cylindra with mensalem. All because the kids on that trip would one day in their future act against the Master. Him, in his poetic irony, having them create the weapon that kills them. Finally, the Doctor gets through the barrier right as the Master, fed up with the Doctor saving people, pulls out a blaster and kills them all right in front of him.
You think this is sport? Destroying minds, taking the lives of children? What was it all for?
What was it for? You don't stumble across a planet that breaks every rule you grew up with and then start to follow them. I had some fun.
Bringing them back to Gallifrey, flaunting their murders on home ground. The entire council will descend on this place.
The council? Every one of those precious rogue rats was guilty of murder.
Because of you.
The story ends with the two arguing, going 1v1 with Mensalem arrows. The fight is well done for audio, but of course, when the Master wins, he can't bring himself to finish the Master off. It sucks that most of our cast here are dead, but this reunion between 8 and the Bruce Master is really good, almost worth the price of admission. So the story comes to an abrupt end as the Master flees with his tail between his legs, the Doctor left among the corpses of the Master's victims. So while the ending as a whole is good from a third act perspective, and I love 8 and the Master's interactions, it is really disappointing that 8 seems to hijack the protagonist role, distracting the story when the shock and horror of all our decent main characters, especially Gamara and Olzel, who are at their most endearing, being murdered in front of us should be the focus. Now this overall is a very good story, if it were in one story, but I can't really appreciate it as the 3 parts are so separated. If it were all one box set, I think it would get a 7 out of 10, but the way the stories are formatted and the way Time has managed to separate those parts does make the issues I have with the first 2 more glaring. But this is a pretty solid finale, bringing everything together, and while a little off-putting from a narrative perspective, 8 coming in and having time with the Master is highly entertaining. I liked the choice of Master for this story. Sure, he's not the most manipulative we know, but I think Eric Roberts plays that side very well. And while it is of course named as his story, I like that Lizzie Hopley took one of her earlier ideas and essentially made this Dark Gallifrey mother quiver. I'll give Dark Gallifrey Master Part 3 an 8 out of 10. A strong and dark finish to a good story, that unfortunately failed to carry interest as well as the other full stories like Missy and Morbius. That leaves Dark Gallifrey Master with an average score of 7 out of 10, being on par with The War Master, sharing a disappointing start, but I think this story had a more consistent and easier to comprehend story, with a stronger ending from a tonal perspective. Where that story had great light-hearted comedy in the middle, this one goes for a much darker tone, and it seems we'll go back to comedic with the monks, which I can't wait for. Thank you everybody for watching my review of Dark Gallifrey Master Part 3. Please like the video if you liked it, comment down below if you wish, consider subscribing to the channel if you do, ring the notification bell so that you're told every single time that I make an upload. Once again, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next review. Bye!
Toast. A little piece of toast, because there's so much to choose from. There's brown bread, white bread, all sorts of wholemeal bread. It comes in funny packages with writing on the side.